here we go, the RTX 4080, and then this, no, it's not quite the 7900 XTX, but we're going to use it as a proxy for it. This is a 6900 XT. Look at that size difference. Wow. And remember, if you guys like content like this, remember to subscribe so we reach 50,000 subscribers soon. Smash that like button. And look, I'm holding this GPU with one hand. That's pretty impressive. I'd subscribe. But anyway, so the 7900 XTX definitely has some problems. And no, I guess maybe the size isn't one of them, because it's going to be almost the same size as the previous reference 6900 XT, but it's also going to come in cheaper than this guy, the 4080. This is the main competition. As awesome as this cooler is, nobody really wanted to buy this because at $1,200 it's not really that great of a value, and at $1,000 this one looks a lot better, or the 7900 XTX version if you can use your imagination. So we've seen some 3D Mark synthetic benchmarks, and this GPU gets kind of close to this one but doesn't quite beat it. And of course, we've seen that some reference models will be available in very limited numbers, meaning you may have to actually buy an expensive AIB model, making the 7900 XTX about the same price most likely as a 4080. And if you're not getting ray tracing, then you have to pay the same amount for around the same performance. Are you just going to end up getting a 4080? These are the questions that really mean that AMD could be in trouble unless we get a little bit of a surprise in the games and the benchmarks that we'll see next week. The performance reviews will officially come out next week, but we're starting to see leaks. Primarily, we saw 3D Mark, and this is going to be a synthetic benchmark, so it doesn't really, tell you the whole story. We have to see the gaming benchmarks. It's under the RTX 4080. You should say, all right, it's a little bit under, but at least it's close. It's also going to be cheaper, right? Well, with an MSRP of $999, technically it is cheaper, the XTX. But this is where you start to take contextual information from the market and everything that's going on. And then look at this. Apparently in Europe, they're only going to get 7,000 of the reference editions, and then 3,000 will separately go over to Germany. Now, people thought that the 130,000 number for the 4090 that we saw early on was a low number, so 7,000 is much, much lower. And of course, here we're talking about a specific segment of the market and the reference edition. Not only that, China, which is also a pretty big market, are getting 0 reference editions. Where am I going with this? If you don't have a reference edition for sale, what's the next option? That's going to be the AIB model, or the third-party model, such as from Asus, Power Color. And what do these all have in common? They're not going to come most likely with a $999 MSRP. They're going to be considerably more expensive because they're going to have their own custom cooler. They're going to have overclocking. They're probably going to have like a triple 8-pin power. They're generally going to be upgraded cards compared to the reference model. And of course, something else that's upgraded is also going to be the price. It's not going to be $999. I would say some of the beefier XTX models, I would say they're probably going to come in at $1,200, just like the base price of the 4080. Now, to be fair, the 4080 does jump all the way up to $1,549 for certain models like the Strix, but most of them are close to that $1,200 model. Like, you can find a lot of the Gigabyte models for $1,269. You can find a few models in stock. Even today, I checked on Newegg, they had some in stock before, and then of course various places have been having them in stock. So the 4080 has been what we could consider fairly widely available for a new GPU launch. Now, even, of course, Micro Centers have them, but I understand not that many people have them in their state or even in their country. But Newegg, people have more access to. Even Amazon, which often is nefarious for having overpriced third-party GPUs, did have some 4080s as well, along with Best Buy, which earlier this month had a pretty massive launch, which is what I'm thinking Nvidia is trying to react to AMD's launch, just trying to saturate the market so there are more GPUs out there before people make their decision if they're going to buy the new AMD GPUs. So I guess a way to incentivize the AIB partners to make it interesting for them to sell GPUs at a higher price than the $999 number would tell you would be to limit the reference models. If AMD flooded the market with $999 reference 7900 XTX, you can bet that they would sell those out even with large numbers of stock, because first, it's going to be the cheapest MSRP, and as we've learned, typically you're going to get pretty much all of the performance as some of the AIB models. Aside from a couple, they do have more power. There could be more more headroom. That is something we're going to see. To be fair, these AIB models could push the power a little bit more. We even heard of a potential like 500 watt 7900 XT. That would be like a really, really crazy overclocked version. We can see that happening. But typically for the price, you're going to get pretty much all of the performance on a reference model. On the Nvidia side, the Founders Edition, some of them are even better than the AIB models. So chew on that one. But on the AMD side, it is possible to get more, but most people, like I said, would be willing to buy the reference model, and the design is aesthetically very pleasing. And I know the size, people have been joking about Nvidia being like a huge GPU, especially for the 4080 and 4090, and the 7900 XTX is a tiny little small GPU in comparison that you can certainly fit in basically any case that you could fit a GPU into now. There's nothing particularly jarring about its size, and it's only a dual 8-pin. In fact, I have a 6900 XT right here. It's not that much bigger than this guy. And look, very easy to lift. And in here, you can't see it, but I actually do have a 4080 Founders Edition, which is considerably bigger. In fact, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to take it out the system right now so I can show you guys. Give me a second. I'm unscrewing it with like one hand. It's a pretty chunky GPU. I'm not going to be able to take it out with one hand. Let me take these cables out carefully. I don't want this thing to like blow up. Look at that guy. That's a huge GPU compared to this 6900 XT, and the 7900 XT is not that much bigger than this one. It's a little bit bigger, not too much. So certainly it's going to be, oh, this is hurting my arm actually. It's very heavy. Of course, it's a very, delightful cooler. I mean, look at the size. I could go on probably 20 minutes just talking about the awesome heft and weight of this GPU, but let me put it down before I go a little bit too crazy. It's like when I walk into a micro center, you go there for one thing, all of a sudden like 2 hours pass and I'm looking at every aisle just like, nerding out on every single little thing that I want to buy, like even little cables and power adapters start making you excited. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. The reference model is the cheapest one, and it's a pretty attractive model, as I was making my point. And therefore, people would buy them out in case AMD actually provided a lot of them. So it's in AMD's interest really to appease their AIB partners to kind of hold back a little bit and not have a huge amount of these reference models so that the AIBs can, like Power Color and Asus and Gigabyte, so they can sell their more expensive models, or else they wouldn't have an incentive for people to really buy them if you can get this for cheaper. And personally, I kind of like the reference models. Like the build quality is really solid. Like we don't even have to go back to this guy, which is a crazy cooler. Really nice. The reference models have really crazy build quality. So then if most of these markets don't get this reference model, they're going to have to be forced to buy the AIB models. And if it's going to be a really popular GPU, the AIBs can change the price on a whim much easier than AMD can. Even late into the game, the 6900 XT stayed at its MSRP, even when they were selling on the street for like double the price, because AMD and Nvidia, being the primary sort of manufacturers, they can't as easily change the price in the middle of a launch like a third-party AIB custom card can, because they can just tell their retailers, oh, this card used to be $999, but now the price went up because of X and this and that and demand. It's going to be $1,500. And the AIB partners, like we saw during 2021, did that pretty much left and right, raising the prices of these GPUs until they got pretty exorbitant. And now, of course, the prices have gone down and we're dealing with these newer GPUs. Now they can sort of raise the prices, but thankfully AMD at least did keep the 7900 XT the same price, the XTX rather, the top one, the same price as this one, $999. But does that mean that they're planning to sell you more AIB models, which can be that number plus anything? It could be $1,200. Depending how it sells, it could match this guy. I mean, this is $1,200 right here, the 4080, and in some other places, such as in the UK, they had to lower the price of the 4080, like we discussed previously, and even some AIB models are going under MSRP at this point because they're not selling very well, and typically the European and the UK prices are going to be a lot higher than we're used to perhaps in the US. So Having said that, some of the performance numbers may not justify having that really high price. That's why in the beginning of the video I said AMD may actually be in trouble. These performance numbers, while they're still impressive and they beat last generation, they're going to be coming in just a little bit under this guy, this GPU, and thus, even though it's interesting, at $999 what the reference model would be, it's probably a good buy. I mean, this is just speculation. The performance, I think, in some games, it's going to match or maybe beat a little bit the 4080, much like the synthetic benchmarks get really close to the 4080. But of course, it's not going to outright beat it. And when you put in ray tracing, which this guy does really well, this GPU will crush anything that AMD can do. And that's unfortunately really important for a lot of people now that want to buy a GPU this expensive. You want to turn on all of the eye candy, right? And play on Ultra. Well, you're paying over $1,000 for a GPU. You bet you're probably going to want to get this then, because that's going to be the only one that's competently going to do it, this and the 4090. The 7900 XTX, the one that's going to look like this, 6900 XT, is going to be great at rasterization, but ray tracing, as we've seen some of the numbers from AMD themselves, it's a little bit more like a 3090 Ti or something like that, which isn't bad, but it's certainly not on the same level as you can get from Nvidia. And when you're paying that kind of money, that could be a potential issue as well for AMD. And then you combine that with some of the potential low reference models available, and that means higher priced AIB models. This GPU, the 7900 XTX, could end up being the same price as a 4080, and for that, people should just buy the 4080. If it's going to be the same performance and you're getting better ray tracing, why would you get the AMD GPU? Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have a technical advantage if it's the same price. The good thing about AMD is a cheaper price. That's what people are looking for. Unfortunately, that's really the reality of the situation. All right, guys, so let me know what you think down below. Which GPU do you plan to pick up, a 7900 XTX, or if you're not impressed, are you finally going to get a 4080? Let me know what you think. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.